Roster management, all-star game preparation, December meetings, the transfer portal, the college football playoff, and so much more. Christmas fun for NFL, NCAA teams, scouts, and front offices. The schedule seems to slow down this time of year, but I can promise you there is still plenty to do. Eric Stokes has been a part of those conversations all the way to the assistant GM level, and he knows a thing or two about building rosters. So today, Neil and I ask those questions as we talk all things football here on Scouting the League. Everyone, and welcome to Scouting the League. First thing I will ask as we get started here today, spread that Christmas cheer. Head over and give us a like, subscribe, and share wherever you are listening and watching. From our home at Fans First Sports Networks or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or with that video content on YouTube, we need you. Like a present under the tree is you giving us those likes, subscribes, and shares. Go do it now, unless, of course, you are driving. Then, of course, I will allow you to do it later. That is okay. One thing you should not wait until later, if you are a scout, is build a scouting community. Scouting the League is stepping into that fold to create and nurture a community that will help scouts at every turn. NFL players and their agents have a database of contracts to compare when it comes time to sign a new contract. Have you as a scout ever seen another scouting contract? What are scouts in similar situations getting paid? What about benefits? What more should or could you be asking for? You also know that every team has multiple people looking at contracts along with the NFLPA. Have you ever had your scouting contract evaluated by someone that knows contracts? How close to being an unconscionable contract is that scouting contract? Beyond that, there is the mentoring, preparing for future promotions, and so much more. Scouting the League is stepping into that fold to be the source for you. If you're interested, let me know. Shoot me a text. Don't have my number. Find someone on your staff that probably does, or reach out on X. I am at RightStepADV, or head to my website, rsafootball.com. You can shoot me a message from there. Scouts, we are a tight-knit group on the road. We should be tight-knit when it comes to working in our space as well. Let's make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else in the industry. Let's do that with the scouting community. And to the subject matter at hand, all things roster management and preparation for the draft process. Joined, as always, by a man who probably had a great time watching those Navy midshipmen beat the Army Golden Knights. He is Neil Stratt. Neil, how much fun was it watching that game?
You know, it's funny. In the modern era, you're starting to see the Army-Navy game almost as a trap game. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, Navy played in the AAC final, narrowly lost their whole backfield, came back, lost Army, even though they were decidedly better. Army has been playing all these big games for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Now they play Army-Navy. They got nothing left in the tank, and I think that's kind of what showed there. I mean, Gray easily had the worst game he's had all year. 2 interceptions and a number of negative plays, and it was very satisfying for me. And then getting the quarterback back helped as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's no denying that, but incredibly satisfying and really exciting. Well played both sides. I'm not trying to hear to beat the drum too much. I mean, it was. I'm always proud of both teams, obviously, but it was pretty satisfying to see a win after so many struggles in the second half of the season.
Yeah, well, it is for so many people that hate the run game, hate the triple offense, think it's antiquated. It is a thing of beauty to watch it executed to perfection. And then if you want to watch that game and go back and think about some of the wrinkles that these really good teams, you see the Chiefs do it, you see the Ravens do it. Again, triple option is everywhere. It's just dressed up and disguised a little bit better, and all those roots are back with those schools, with our armies, navies, air forces. So it's fantastic. We'll make sure you check out Neil. He's on he's on X at Inside the League. InsideTheLeague.com is his website. If you aren't already, make sure you sign up for his Friday wrap. Check out his blog as well, Succeed in Football. succeedinfootball.com. Some really good notes. If you are in the football world, you will want to check that out. I am Roderick David at RightStepADV on X is where you can find me. My website is rsafootball.com. And our guest, his second time on the podcast with us this year, Eric Stokes, a man that has had titles all the way from scout to director, all the way up to that assistant general manager seat. Eric, really good to have you back on. Welcome back to Scouting the League.
Hey, man, thanks a lot for having me back on the show. Look forward to it.
Yeah, it is a busy time of the year. We were just talking about that between the holidays, between the end of the college football season. We got a college football playoff now. You got NFL stuff going on. It's nice. It's always one of those things. Grain of salt. You find the silver lining in actually having holidays. Structured holidays where you can spend a whole day with family this time of year. It's you find that silver lining, right?
It has been very refreshing. So I've definitely enjoyed spending the time with family.
Cool. Well, the last time we talked, Eric, we spent some time, again, some strong Nebraska ties, and we spent some time talking Nebraska right before that Colorado game. They get the huge win against that Colorado team that was, arguably a win away from having a really good case to make the college football playoff. They have the Heisman Trophy winner. They may have the first quarterback in the draft taken. That is a hot team. So Colorado was a big win. Nebraska starts really well. And yet you come back at the end of the season and you're almost left disappointed. Again, we'll get your take on it. You circle that Illinois game, a game that you have to have that one. You got to get that one. You lose to UCLA after you almost knock off Ohio State. You get that huge win against Wisconsin to get bowl eligible, take a little pressure off. But then again, you go to Iowa in the Cyhawk game and you can't get it done. Or sorry, the arms, not the side. Yes. Cyhawk is Iowa State, whatever right. Military, whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever the game is. So again, you're in a bowl game. You play in December 28th against Boston College. It's a step in the right direction. Is that enough anymore? Kind of how do you evaluate the Nebraska season?
I think where the program is right now, that was a step in the right direction. People forget now. It's been a long time, almost a decade, if I'm not mistaken, since they've been in a bowl game, which is really hard to believe. So, I think I'm even on record saying I thought this was a 6 or 7 win team, if I'm not mistaken. That's right about where they landed. But this was sorely needed. Especially I think for Matt Rule and his staff at this time, I definitely see this as a positive step in the bigger picture in terms of being bowl eligible this year.
Good. So really the big loss, I believe they lose their defensive coordinator to Florida State. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Tony White left unexpectedly, a big surprise to take the Florida State job.
Yeah. It's still Matt Rule's defense, though. How big of loss is that? Obviously, that defense was fun to watch. And again, from a scouting perspective, that's an overachieving defense, which is, again, ultimately what you want. You want the sum of the 11 to be better than any individual player. They go into the portal, grab a big, young 5-star kid from Missouri, steps in the right direction. It's Coach Rule's defense. We know that. Is it? Are they going to get it right on that side of the ball and continue to be, the black shirts that Nebraska fans expect?
Well, they're certainly going to have continuity. They promoted John Butler to the DC role, who was the secondary coach there. And then they brought back Phil Snow, who, as you know, had a long relationship with Coach Rule going back to Baylor. So I think the loss of Tony White really probably, put that in Matt Rule's mindset that, look, I want some continuity. I want to bring back some familiar faces. So had the opportunity to briefly work with Phil Snow when he was in Carolina. I really enjoyed working with him. Has a long time linebackers coach in the NFL, and then John Butler's spent about a decade in the NFL as well. So they should be well equipped to handle the loss of Tony White, and again, hopefully they can just continue to keep building.
Yeah, let's flip it over on the other side of the ball. The piece that they've got in place in Dylan Raiola at times looked really good. At times looked like a true freshman. We're kind of seeing it with the way this quarterback class is shaken out where, again, all indications are Drew Aller's heading back. Garrett Nussmeier's heading back. the quarterback class this year is just, if you need a guy, this is not the year to go need a guy.
Correct.
Have you studied Dylan Raiola? And knowing he's back, I have to imagine they're at least a top 10 destination for some of these transfer portal wide receivers. And we know the Huskers are going to be able to turn around and pay them if they can maybe go out and get one of those guys.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. In visiting with Matt Rule, literally that's what he said. Because a lot of the recruits that they were bringing in, they're high-level, 4-star, 5-star guys, were literally waiting to see kind of, okay, what was this offense going to look like under Dylan? And just in studying him, look, he looked like a freshman, right? I mean, he had his highs and lows. You saw there's, I think, this ebb and flow, lack of overall consistency right to his game right now, which is kind of what you expect, and especially I think in this new Big Ten. This new Big Ten is a different beast, and I know we spoke about that in August as well. But this is a highly competitive conference right now. So you saw some of that, and so just like our league, it's all about the development of the quarterback. I'm very curious to see. Obviously they made the move with Dana Holgorsen late in the year, promoting him to the offensive coordinator. So there's some big changes there with two new coordinators, so to speak. Seeing what Dana Holgorsen's going to bring to the table with his Mike Leach background. And again, it's all about the development of the quarterback. And I would just say that for Dylan, it gets really down to fundamentals when you really watch his game. I just, really his fundamentals need to be refined and cleaned up. And I think some of that too was so much hype, the Patrick Mahomes comparisons, some things that probably shouldn't have been thrown out there. And I just think, let's let Dylan be Dylan. Let's put an emphasis on, developing the Q, and let's get these fundamentals honed in, and just really all those, small nuances of the game that you learn over time. And then let's see where we are after that. And that's really how I see the program. Certainly they need more explosive playmakers now, though, to match what's in the Big Ten. They're missing explosiveness at the receiver positions. They're missing explosiveness at the running back position. And look, you're always going to need offensive linemen now. So those are kind of some of the areas that I think where they're light and that they're going to hope to address as they push towards the recruiting.
Eric, is it a concern to you that Raiola enters year two basically having had two systems or at least two coordinators running his offense? I mean, that's a lot to throw at a kid, especially at a young age, especially a kid as much under as much pressure as you alluded to earlier.
It's always a concern. I mean, obviously it was a concern because there were some talks about him entering the transfer portal and then he had to shut that down. So, certainly, this early stage in Coach Rule's tenure, we know how much continuity, how valuable it is, right? We're seeing in our league with Caleb Williams and versus the continuity that you're getting right now with Jaden Daniels and seeing how these, young quarterbacks are developing when it comes to Bo Nix and these guys are in our league. So it definitely is a real thing. So I think the bowl from that standpoint was probably even more important because you're going to get that extra 2 weeks or 17 days to kind of start already implementing new philosophies, right, from an offensive standpoint. And you can kind of get a little bit of a head start on spring ball by just being bowl eligible. So if nothing else, that was really important, I think, for this year for Nebraska.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, the Huskers being relevant is good for college football. The Big Ten is, again, if the transfer portal, the ability to pay players, again, the SEC has the right to say they've been the dominant conference, but again, it's all going to get leveled out, not just among conferences, but within conferences. And again, if you've got the quarterback, you're going to have a great chance, which again, let's jump into the college football playoff now. You've got 12 teams this year, and holy cow, Oregon has to be the favorite. They're the number one overall, but man, after that, you can really make a case for a bunch of these different teams to have a chance based on the style they play, based on who the signal car. Again, Drew Aller gets hot. Again, all of a sudden, Penn State is tough to beat. If Ohio State could figure out their quarterback, again, they're as talented as anybody. And again, you've got Dylan Gabriel, a Heisman finalist who, again, from an NFL standpoint, again, you can debate that one. Where is he at? Where does he fall on the board? But Oregon's the team to beat. Carson Beck, maybe all of a sudden the Georgia Bulldogs look like what they have been in the past, which again, good luck beating Georgia if Carson Beck is the first round prospect that everyone thought he was.
Right.
who are you looking at? What are you looking at, and where do you see this
Well,
college football playoff
the
going over the
team you
next
did
couple of
mention
weeks?
is Texas, and I think Texas
There
is.
we go.
I think they're actually really have the best, might arguably the best team in the conference. So, I'm curious about how their path plays out. Playing in the SEC championship game is always tough, playing that game, and I'm a little concerned. I would just say for Georgia and Texas, that war of attrition over the course of this season, I'm worried about how that affects how that may play out for them if they run out of gas. But I think, right now, as I see it, I actually think Texas is probably the most talented team. And certainly if Quinn Ewers is healthy and then you start sprinkling in a little Manning in there, there's something they're forced to deal with. Their defense is outstanding. That alone can pretty much kind of get them to the final. So they're another kind of one of my dark horses in that tournament.
Eric, Texas has been a team that's kind of confounded us. I think at times Roderick and I have both been big believers and kind of fallen off the horse on them and that kind of thing. And it all kind of traces back to me, to the quarterback. At this point, are you a Quinn Ewers believer or a Quinn Ewers doubter?
I'm more of a doubter, but I would just say I think in studying Quinn Ewers and having a chance to actually, I've studied him last year. I mean, it's not like I don't have familiarity with him. I kind of understand what he is, and so for him, all the pieces have to be right. And that includes Sark is an amazing play caller. I think we would both agree on that. This guy's probably one of
Absolutely.
the best play callers in college football without question. So I think for Quinn Ewers, so many things kind of around him have to come together in order to, he's not going to raise the level of the offense right by himself. So I don't think he is that type of talent. But obviously they have so many pieces, and if he can just distribute, work off of Sark's play calling, execute the offense, then everything should take care of itself. But it has been a little odd that it seems like he's held them back a little bit from really being a really explosive offense to some degree.
Do you think he's and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, we're going to talk about players a little later on, but do you see Quinn as a day two prospect now? Is he on that day 2, day 3 bubble, or could he even sneak up into day 1 with the right January, February, March, and April?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing about the queues. It's to me that is one of the longest processes that we have to work through, regardless of any position. So it's probably a little too soon to say. But look in my world right now, he's really more in the day 2 category. I just right now it's hard for me to say that he'd go in the first round of the draft. Even in this class, I'd be a little far fetched. But again, I think as we go through the process, find out more about who these guys are, we'll get a better sense of it. So,
sure,
yeah, that character piece again, it goes into every prospect. Again, our film work is largely done on all these guys. Scouts are again talking to people. It's like the 19th. Hey, hit me after the 19th. I got deadline of the 19th or the 17th, or maybe it was last week, and teams are in December meetings, and we'll talk about all of that. The film work's done. That character piece is what really starts heating up now. And again, you have your phases of final reports. Before we jump into that, Eric, again, you've been talking about the work you've been doing, again, being out of it this year and the oddities that come with not being with the team. You recently went through the NFL Accelerator program. Talk to us about what that is, what you went through. Again, it's a term even in the industry that I have heard, but again, I don't think many people know much about it. So talk to us a little bit about that and kind of what was involved with it.
Yeah, it was really very fortunate to have the opportunity to get invited to the NFL Accelerator program, not being affiliated, because the program really entails it gives basically upcoming front office executives face-to-face meetings with club ownership. You get an opportunity to meet some incredible speakers. We had GMs come in. And so it's just a platform, again, to kind of give you a little bit more exposure to, having those face-to-face conversations, upper level management, having an opportunity to speak with some incredible speakers in terms of leadership. And then, really having the cherry on top when you have, high level executives come in and really have a safe, transparent space to really kind of lay it out. Look, this is what being a GM is really all about, right? And it's so hard to really have those conversations when we talk about the family secrets, right? No one really wants to talk about process, how they do things, their challenges. It's kind of hard to have unless you and we all do, but unless you have those really close relationships. So to be able to have that space with some of the men that came in and women was outstanding.
Good. I mean, it's valuable. We've talked about it on here. That's one of the, because you're a good scout, a good road scout, a good area scout, doesn't mean you're going to make a great director. And again, it's really hard when you're on the road to understand, hey, what's all going on the director's plate. And it goes with every level. There is, from my opinion, a lack of development, a lack of training. Again, a lot of guys get promoted because they're good at their current job, and they get thrown into a spot where there is, again, on the job training is tough in the NFL when you better win. Oh, also learn all this new stuff and manage all these people. It becomes, a really, really tough spot. The accelerator program obviously doing really good things, and we see good organizations putting programs in place, again, to hopefully help people at every level, boys, girls, scouts, salary cap, analytics, as they continue to have good, healthy, growing careers, do the right things, and that's all going to help the NFL specifically have a nice, healthy league.
And I think that's a great point, because it is a diverse group of people. We're coming from all different backgrounds. Not everyone in the room just coming from a scout background. We have analytics, we have salary cap. In fact, we have some player development people that were in the room. So it is a wide net of people. And look, there's a wide net of. You can come from a variety of levels to ascend to the GM role. There is no one path anymore. There's multiple lanes now, I think, to sitting in that chair, and it entails so many more different things than it did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So the GM landscape is entirely different now.
Now, Eric, for you be sitting in that room with them, there may not have been many people who were ex-players who also have been risen as high as assistant GM. You've already got a lot of experience on this level. Aside from the fact of the pure diversity of it and so many different paths and so many different people in there, was there one major takeaway you kind of got from that really you felt, hey man, that's an arrow I need to add to my quiver that I didn't really think about, or maybe something kind of gave you exposure that you didn't previously have?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've had the fortune of this is my third time taking part in the Accelerator program. So I took part in the original one that took place in Atlanta, and then we've had the past two have taken place in Dallas over the ownership meeting. So look, you're always going to take something away from it. And the biggest thing you take away from it is, challenge yourself in the areas where you don't have the familiarity, right? Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's one of the biggest takeaways that it really comes away from, it's even when you're talking to executives, some of the leadership workshops, it is about getting uncomfortable and dabbling in some of the areas, again, where you may not have comfort. So, if that's salary cap for someone, or if that's analytics for someone, or if you're from the opposite, maybe you're from a salary cap background, you don't know a lot about scouting or the process of scouting, get familiar with the areas where that you don't have a lot of exposure to, and that's the best way, right, to grow and have a growth mindset. So that's really the things that I always come away from that particular event.
Yeah, well, no doubt we will see again names that were part of the accelerator program again over the next month or so. Again, we're already seeing some interviews being done with people not currently with teams. Again, we've seen, I think, John Robinson, Thomas Dimitrov, somebody I know well. Who was the other one? Lewis Riddick there in New York. I think those were all announced. So again, we're seeing the names out there, and again, it's always it's the other fold in the magazine is the names as these people are going to start getting interviewed are with other teams, which means requests have to be made. There's going to be some red tape. There's going to be a lot that goes into it. Hey, also we're trying to still win games and have a job to do amongst all of it. So it becomes
there's a long way to go in that process. There's a long way to go.
Yeah, we are. We're here in just before Christmas, and again, plenty of backdoor stuff. And again, it'll start to get to the front door where we can see it all. But NFL roster management. Let's get to it. Again, we are at that time of year where we officially see in standings teams that have both clinched playoff berths and teams that have been officially mathematically eliminated, and those teams that, hey, they're just trending all in the wrong direction. We can start to see it. That is going to have different roster management decisions. Again, maybe it's something you're going to do with IR. Maybe it's going to be something you do with the practice squad. You're probably thinking about poaching a little bit more. There's a lot of different ways to go about NFL roster management this time of year. Talk through, again, really for the teams that are in the playoffs, making the playoffs on the bubble, maybe those teams are out of the playoffs. What are some of the different considerations that are going into these meetings where you may have a director of player personnel that really wants to do something? The GM say, hey, let's stand pat a little bit, or hey, there's people that are wanting to knock the door down and start doing stuff.
Yeah, I think if you're a team right now, let's just start, say in the playoffs, right? You're just going all in to try to get to the postseason. That's all the focus, and so you're going to basically use every avenue that you have. You're going to go deep into that well to try to put together the best roster that you can on Sundays, so that it gives you the best opportunity to win. And the other thing that you might start toying around a little bit with is you might start looking at some of the as far as their advanced scouting, right, on the pro personnel side. So the advanced scouting is basically just kind of a little peek see for the coaches about some upcoming opponents, some of their tendencies, what their roster looks like. You have some analytics in there in terms of run, pass percentages, and formation tendencies. So that's kind of what would consist in analytics. Would be consistent in advance. So you might go ahead and start, looking at 2 or 3 teams and looking at what are some of the possibilities in terms of where you may fall in terms of the order. If you're get to be, once you start to get to that 3, 4, 5, 6 seed, so to speak, what does that kind of look like? So those are some of the things that you would look at if you were pretty much so contending for the playoffs.
What about for these teams like the Jets, where the head coach move has already been made? You're going to have a new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. Chicago's in the same boat. You're going to have change. You're going to have change maybe in philosophy. You're going to have change in style of play and scheme. Are your hands tied? How much are they tied? Are you wanting to upgrade your team, your roster, but also you don't know what direction you're going at this point? Talk through that process and what is there a right way to do it, or kind of what's the most common way?
Well, I think, we spoke a little bit about this, but the number one thing you have to do is you are just constantly evaluating your roster. A lot of those things you mentioned, you can't control some of those things right now in terms of, if you've made changes to a staff, and I've been a part of it, at different levels. So there's not a lot you can do. You can stay status quo, but I always say first and foremost, the evaluation of the roster is going to be the most critical piece as you move forward. So you are really, fighting down. And look, that's a part of the process. Everyone evaluates their roster week to week. You're going to do weekly evaluations, quarter evaluations, a mid-season evaluation. You'll do a season-ending evaluation. So I did all those things that, as a director of pro personnel for my staff. And so you're certainly going to, have that tidied up. And then look, in December, you're going to go ahead and start having, you may have a conversation now. You may have a UFA meeting, but really it's just what's the lay of the land look like? What's heavy, what's light, are the positions? Maybe is there a prominent RFA? You might start talking a little bit about other teams' practice squads. One of the things that we do also in the pro personnel side is we evaluate everyone's practice squads around the league. So we'll not only do we rank their practice squads, but we rank them in terms of how we see as the most talented players. So you might start talking a little bit about that, potential poaches. Obviously, you're going to start having some dialogue about your reserve futures. In that UFA meeting, you're also going to talk about potential players that could be open for voidables or, cap casualties. So, you may have several kind of conversations going on in terms of where you're looking, with the roster. The other thing is look, you're going to start getting to some of the medical. Probably if you're one of those teams, and this is the way this league works, but if you're probably one of those teams that's close to being out of it, you've also probably had a war of attrition of injuries more than likely. That tends to kind of coincide with teams that are struggling late in the year. And so, look, you have to look at, what's the medical plan for some of these players. You can kind of start getting ahead. You may have some conversations with some agents in terms of, what is their player going to be? Where is their place that they're sending them? Kind of what is kind of their plan. So for some of these guys, if you're seeing going on IR, you can already start meshing, look, what's the plan? You can get together with your strength staff, your sports performance, your trainers, your doctors, and you can already start having some soft conversations in that regard. And then again, the most important thing is just evaluate the roster. I can't stress that enough.
Eric, let's say you're a team. Let's move over to the college draft side. Let's say you're a team that needs a quarterback, and we know obviously that there maybe isn't the talent at the top of the draft that there has been in previous classes, but at the same time, there are some players that were once highly regarded that you may be able to get in the second or third round. Maybe if lightning strikes, maybe even later. Is this an opportunity class for a team like that may be looking for a bargain, or is it a bad class because, hey, I need a certified guy that I can take to the top? If that means I've got to move up, that's what I do. I mean, which way are you looking at this as a good thing or a bad thing if you're in need of a quarterback coming into the 2025 draft?
Well, if you're in need of a quarterback, it's not a good thing. I mean, that's just the reality. And look, it's the quarterback set the tone for the draft.
Sure.
And so if there's depth at the quarterback position, really it's already a pretty strong draft in our world. If there's not, well, now we're looking to pivot, and probably the strength of the draft class is not as strong because again, as we talked about, there's no greater position that's more important than that QB class. So it certainly creates pressure. Let me just say that it certainly creates a level of pressure that and you can't reach. So even as you I was always very hesitant right now to kind of get too much into some of the round discussions. I mean, look, obviously we have the grades, we have all that, but it's a little bit too far to really get too far down the road in terms of trying to strategically place yourself right now. Unless you have the number one overall pick in the draft, then it doesn't matter because only one person controls the draft right now, and that's whoever has that number one spot. Everything else, will organically kind of fall into place as you work through the process, and that's really how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting into December meetings. You've got, again, every team, most teams, I won't say every team, most teams are going to bring their scouts in for a week to start to discuss some element of the 2025 draft. You were part of a couple different systems. Were you bringing guys in to talk character only? Was it front board? Was it back board? Was it priority position? What was was there a consensus on the way you guys did things?
Well, what's awesome is I've done it every which way you can just in my 25 years. And look, I've been a college director in two different buildings. So look, I've gone through this process where we went through the entire front board, rounds 1 through 7. It was just character only. I've gone through the process in December where we went through rounds 5, 5th round down to free agency. And we really just shook out the board, kind of cleaned it out, so to speak, right? And that was a combination of film, character, the whole nine. And then I've been in situations where we only did free agency and it was just purely the backboard and you just wanted to clean up and stack those guys right now and kind of get a sense of where that was. And then and then I've also been in places where we went ahead and, look, hey, let's look at this first round and let's maybe go through the first 20, 25 players that we think are first round picks and kind of see how that kind of shapes up. So, I don't think there's any right or wrong. Obviously, within all those discussions as you go through the character, which is always going to be a piece of that. Look, you're going to talk about the player's personal character, his football character. You're going to get into mental. You're going to get into durability. Is he a good teammate? You're jumping into all the family background, any off the field issues. Can he learn? What's the work ethic like, right? So there's a whole series of kind of topics that you really kind of get into and you want to track. And, when you really, at the end of the day, when you really go through this process, it's really about, okay, the next step now, let's go out now and find the answers to the questions that we have, right? And so for literally every prospect on the board, whether you're working the front board, the back board, or 5th round on down, you want to create a series of questions that you want to have answered by the time you get to the draft, and that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, there's that element of the college football playoff now. With December meetings have now happened, you may still have potentially 3 opportunities to see these guys and get some in-game answers. which is really unique to what, again, maybe it used to be one, maybe it used to be two bowl games. If you could say those mattered, again, opt-outs, and again, the way different teams approach bowl games. Again, some of these, especially quarterbacks, and then high priority players, the premier players in the first round, you have potentially 3 more answers now post December meetings. And like you said, the answering the questions, something that every scout is constantly working to answering questions. You go through your December meetings, you're writing stuff down. How much is that setting the table for where you're going to start sending people, whether it's these college football playoff games, all-star games, combine, pro days? How much of what you guys are going through in December meetings is set in that plan?
Yeah, I mean that absolutely sets the tone and direction, because coming out of those December meetings, that's also when you're going to start signing scouts to the different All-Star games, and really kind of start seeing, look, how do we want to strategically attack this draft, and look, everyone has their different process and what matters to them, but that's exactly what you're doing. You're going to kind of set the tone for really where you're going to send people, and I'd be curious. I don't know. They've changed the rules up in terms of these bowl games. So I'm curious how they're allowing, what kind of coverage they're giving the teams this year in terms of live looks at these premier games. I'd be very curious. There was a time when they just did a lottery, and then that kind of shifted. But certainly, look, these are high profile games. This is going to be the best against the best. You're always excited from a scouting perspective, especially when these guys say they want to play in these games and get a chance to see how they compete. And to be very clear, we'd never hold it against them, right? We're always excited when the premier players want to show up and play in these games. Look, we tipped our hat to them, and look, you'd never look at a player in a one-game vacuum. I always say that. So even the guys that are premier and some of the top players, if they don't have a strong showing, if something happens, I from my standpoint, I never really held it against them. I didn't see it that way. I always was excited to see the top guys want to go out and compete. That's what that's what our business is all about. The guys that can play hurt, you love it. The guys that can push through the injuries, the guys that want to play against the best of the best, those are the type of guys that you want to have on your team.
Eric, shifting back to the CFP for a minute, is there a player that sticks out to you that, with a nice run in the CFP, could really elevate his status? Could it be maybe a Beck who's kind of had a half and half season? Could it be a Janty who really hasn't seen this level of play so far this season? Are there other players that may come to mind to you that could really, this could be their chance to be on the big stage and really move up?
I certainly think this would be helpful for Carson Beck, and I also really think Jalen Milroe will probably have the biggest to me, this could we'll see where this kind of goes with him, because he's an exciting prospect, an exciting talent, and I'm sorry, I know he's not in this, but excuse me, but I'm just saying, I know he's playing in terms of the bowl game. In terms of the bowl game, I think that he's one of those guys that falls into that category of. I'm very curious to see what that looks like with some time off, some refinement. So, and in terms of, say, the CFP. I do think Ewers is one of those. I think these quarterbacks, right? I mean, that's the thing about it, is we just want to see them stack some games together, see the consistency level, and just kind of see what they do as we talk about the 2 Qs that are in this college playoff series.
Yeah. You talk about
I wonder if
those
Michael Penix would be in
performances.
Atlanta right now if it weren't for the 2 games he had at the end of the year last year. So, yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. You're right. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, again, stacking those games together. Again, one bowl game or one game within the college football playoff, again, can get some headlines that you have to talk about through the process. Putting, again, maybe 3 games together that some of these teams are going to have a Tennessee or an Ohio State, one of these lower ranked teams that has a chance to make a run. You could set the narrative. That always used to be one of the late season, again, media, and the narrative that the media starts carrying, that you have to answer for 4 months through the draft process. For scouts, it used to be one of those things, you acknowledged it, you knew it was out there, and you better have an answer for it, because there were going to be outside voices that somehow got into the room at least the questions had to be answered, which is always an interesting part of these end of the year prime time. Again, maybe one game on TV, so everybody's actually looking at it as opposed to these other games.
And look, that's the reality. What's making our job so much harder, right? There are so many because of social media and the way that everything
Yep.
is covered. There are so many outside voices now that kind of infiltrate or try to infiltrate the process, and so you really do have to, cover your ears and put on your blinders and put your head down and trust your process because it's definitely getting. I think it's more difficult for the athletes, and again, it's more difficult for the organizations as well.
Eric, along with the college football playoff with bowl games, players have now signed with agents, and then kind of the first big step for them is these all-star games. Again, Hula Tropical, CGS, the College Gridiron Showcase, kind of your first wave games where you're going to go out there, again, get some verifieds, see some guys move around, maybe some small school guys under the radar guys, and then you get through the Senior Bowl and East-West, which again are competing for that top spot, Senior Bowl, the kind of premier spot to be best on best. You don't want to over evaluate these games, but they matter. They matter showing up and measuring what everybody thought you were, or dominating at the Tropical or the Hula Bowl, or looking like a man amongst boys at the CGS, whatever it may be. How do you combat, again, going to the Senior Bowl and falling in love with a guy who's, you go back and their film was okay, but man, he had a fantastic Senior Bowl. How do you kind of finish that one off and get that one in the right spot?
Well, again, I always look at the All-Star games. They can only help you; they cannot hurt you. And especially once you get to the Senior Bowl, the guys that perform well at the Senior Bowl, and there's been a lot of studies on that, tend to do well when they come and transition into the league. So, to me, there really is some real merit to the guys that have a good week down there. They do tend to transition pretty well into our league, and look, we know there's so many other factors that go into it with the fit and the organization and the plan, and there's so many things to that. But anytime a guy has a strong week at the Senior Bowl, that's going to raise my eyes. So you talk about Quentin Mitchell, the corner from Toledo. He had a dominant week at the Senior Bowl. He was by far and away the best corner at the Senior Bowl. And look, he went to a system in Philadelphia where now you get to match the pass rush with the back end, and guess what? Guy's pretty good. So I look at that with Jackson Powers, center from the center that the Vegas took. He's had a very good rookie year. He had a strong week down there playing both center and guard, and sure enough, he's I believe started every game for them. So you definitely see some guys that translate really well to that. And I'll tell you, even like from a director's point of view, right? Yeah, I went to pretty much all those games. And the reason why I did that is now I had a complete view of not only just the top of the board, but almost more importantly, what did the bottom half of the board look like? Because, as you know, Roderick, that's where the scouts come in, right? I mean, to me, that's where really good staff, separate themselves once we start getting fifth round down the free agency, and to me, that's where you notice. I think really good organizations. I was in an organization with the Seattle Seahawks at the time. We took three defensive backs in the fifth round. Richard Sherman was one of those guys that we took in the fifth round. Cam Chancellor was another one, and Byron Maxwell was another one. Now, look, in this day and age, those guys aren't going in the fifth round. I think we all know that, but that's the power of having a really good scouting staff, right? And how you kind of get those separations. So I think that's another key point. It's not even we know that basically about 80% of the players that attend the Senior Bowl are going to get drafted really about in the fourth round and up. That's kind of a known thing. But again, I think it's also the other bowl games cannot be understated as well, and are just as important.
Eric, the interview phase at all these All-Star games is an important part of it, maybe a little bit overlooked when you're a fan, that kind of thing, but we all know how important it is. Can you remember a time when you sat down with someone at one of the games, Senior Bowl or even a lower game, and they made an impact on you, on your interest level in them, either negatively or positively? I mean, is there a time when you remember, man, I sure am glad I'm sitting in on this interview here?
Yeah, I would say, probably going back, Cam Chancellor was one of those because I always use him as an example. He's really like my poster child for the interview process and why it's important.
Really?
Because Cam Chancellor was a former quarterback who transitioned to safety, but then he also had a DUI, or he had some type of off the field, and so look, it'd be easy to kind of dismiss a guy who's a former quarterback and just made this transition to safety and is still kind of raw and unrefined, and then has an off the field blip, right? But his interview was so impressive. The maturity, the self awareness. You felt his leadership during the week. There were so many other intangibles that came out. His toughness, his competitive nature. That came out about him, where you just had to say, "Look, we have to find out more about this guy. Like, who is this guy?" And so I kind of use him as a poster child. But I mean, there's been other guys that have, and I'll say this also, like it was so authentic, because that's the biggest piece right now with this interview setup that is changing. Is we know about the agent prep and everyone's bringing in to get these guys ready, but it's really the guys that come across as their true authentic selves that really resonate and you really feel good about. And when they're able to just really be themselves, those are the guys that you get really excited about. And look, I have more of a system. I don't use a script when it comes to the interview. That's why we go through the process of working through the questions. I don't need my scouts writing down a bunch of notes and this and that, right? That are kind of scripted about where you're from and this and that and best game. No, I've always wanted it to be a free flowing, conversational interview. And because again, we want to get to really know who these guys are, right? Really get to know the essence who they are. But more importantly, it's important that they get to know what we're about, right? It's important that, I want them to know who our scouts with. I want them to see a face and be able to connect with that person. And then as we get further down the line with 30 visits and whatnot, when they see that person and they connect, that's awesome. Like I love that. Like I love that when you see an area scout or your college director and he's made a connection with a player, because there's really something to that. Then as far as then now once they come into the building, right? There's a trust that's already being established. So those are the things that really excite me about the interview process.
Yeah. Drilling into what you said about the interviews, what percentage of your interview typically, Eric, was football, and what percentage it was not football? Just getting to know the person, typically speaking.
You know what? I always let the conversation go wherever it went. So
Really?
I really didn't get too concerned initially. Look, the whole thing is that before you can really start asking the real questions, look, develop that relationship, right? Spend time trying to connect with that person on some different levels. It doesn't matter what it may be, right? And then that way, when it comes to asking some of those hard questions or some of the difficult questions, now it's not as awkward. And look, there's art to doing the interview, really, right? Because it needs to be organic. It can't be forced. And so, I always took a lot of pride in that. I always really kind of stress that with our scouts to, keep those conversations as organic as possible and just kind of let them flow. And look, you may not. The thing I always also told the guys is you may not get the answer coming out of this first time. So everyone needs to be patient. I think that's one of the things when you go into these processes is kind of a rush to tell me this, tell me this, tell me that. But that isn't really what's important. There's still plenty of time in the process to kind of get to know the guys, and you're going to get much better information if you're patient with the process than if you try to rush it.
Yeah.
Roderick, was that the same way with you when you were on the road? Because I mean, you're looking at a specific region, and you know a little bit more about the players. You probably have specific questions. Did you find your interviews to be organic, or were you going in trying to get specific answers about stuff that you maybe hadn't been able to answer previously?
Yeah, we were given a script. We had our check boxes that we had to have, but I would naturally, again, I was gonna try to build some rapport. That was the interviews that really stuck with you. Again, you try to find a creative way to get to an answer, or again, see if you can get an answer without asking the question, which is again that nuance of getting to know these guys. Is you in some of these situations you have all the answers already. You just want to hear it from them.
Correct.
Again, the honesty question, or hey, tell me the true story. And again, you kind of go about it that way. Again, I remember the interviews, again, kind of to Eric's point, the interviews, the guys that I remembered, it was you maybe spent 5 to 10 minutes with them at whatever your designated interview time was. But again, I remember Josh Uche out of Michigan. I had a ton of questions about him. He was about a 40% playtime guy on a really good Michigan defense. And, like why? The traits say you should be on the field all the time. I think I spent, 10 to 15 minutes with him every night after our first interview, just because, again, he felt comfortable talking some ball with me. We were kind of in that players waiting room when they had it on the second floor. And again, over that week, over the 3-4 days, you just end up kind of circling back and kind of gravitating towards each other. And again, you get a lot more out of it in that way. And again, for us in Atlanta, we had to hit some checkbox stuff just to make sure we kept the bosses happy. But again, there's going to be so much more that you're going to add to your character report as you go through the process. And again, Josh Uche was one that I will always remember how much better I felt coming out of the Senior Bowl week with him than I did going in. And the most memorable interview I ever had, Ben Skoranek, Northwestern and Notre Dame, and a guy that knew was going to be a 7th round guy, but liked him and would have been one of those guys that I am absolutely pounding the table for after he fell on his face, busted his nose because he actually had a broken foot he was trying to play on. And man, he was just a guy that you could feel in the interview process. So those are some fun ones that stick with you. And again, like Eric said, it's the start of in a lot of ways, a 3.5 month process still, where again, you're answering some questions and still finding out, turning over stones and looking under rocks and, looking for where you're going to get those next answers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move to before we kind of wrap things up. Let's talk about some players. Eric, give us just stream of consciousness, some thoughts on Travis Hunter,
who should have been the number 2 in the Heisman voting. Just going to get that out there, Neil.
Yeah, if you ever listen to our podcast, it's our week-to-week rivalry. I'm glad they got it right, but go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, this guy is a complete one of one in terms of what he did on the college landscape this year. I've never seen a player in my time scouting. I have not seen this type of talent be able to operate on both sides of the ball at the level that he did. His athleticism is off the charts. I'm actually projecting him as a corner. I know there's been a lot of talk. Is he a receiver? Is he a DB? But, here's the irony in terms of how I see it right now with him. It really probably his more natural position actually is a receiver position. But his upside and potential as a corner is far more greater, and it's so hard to find corners, right? You're going to have 40 receivers come out in the league, and there's going to be some receivers even in this draft that can do some of the things that he can do athletically, but as a corner, I don't know if there's too many guys that can match just his physical ability. And again, I'm so excited about the upside with him.
Eric, what will be if you're a team that's going to draft him, let's say you're going to get him, what's your plan for him? How do you, I presume you're going to want to have him on both sides of the ball, but how do you get the meeting time for him? Do you hope that he can pick up the nuances naturally on the corner side because he's got those skills, and then try to work with him on the offense because you've got there's a playing style and a scheme and all that kind of things. How do you attack that? What's your philosophy there?
Yeah, I think first things first. Look, let's get him comfortable at corner in our league, right? There's going to be a transition. It does not matter. No matter how good the guys are. I kind of saw this guy like a Champ Bailey, who I saw coming out of Georgia. There's always a transition. Now, the funny thing is Champ Bailey gets drafted by Washington. Guess who the 2 corners are? Darrell Green and Deion Sanders. So he actually had to wait. But I would just say, let's get him up to speed in terms of playing the corner position. And then we can talk about, okay, how many plays do we want to try to work in maybe offensively? It's not going to be a huge volume. Our league is different. We're only going to be talking about maybe 6 to 10 plays where he's either going to be targeted or he may even be a decoy. But I think as he matures and now we get into season 2, season 3, maybe now you can talk about maybe that 6 to 10 plays is now maybe 15 plays or maybe 20 plays as his game matures. But I think first things first, let's just get him comfortable at corner. Let's get all the nuances and some of the details from technique rounded out in this game, and then we can kind of talk bigger picture in terms of the talent.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, you're the GM for the team that has the number 1 overall pick. Can you pull the card on Travis Hunter, or are you? I think you're obviously listening to offers. You're always going to pick up the phone, but it comes down to it. You have to pick a player. Are you picking Travis Hunter number 1 overall?
I mean, I do think he is the best player in this draft. To answer your question in a nutshell, yeah, I think this guy's the top rated prospect. But again, we all know it's going to come down to the quarterback still. Now, would you maybe entertain the possibility of that? I think you have to, but again, it all depends on how this all shapes up and how quarterback needy teams are. And again, that no matter what you say, that's always going to set the tone for the draft. So, but whoever gets Travis Hunter is, I mean, you're getting a playmaker. You're getting a real player. So, a lot to be excited about there.
Well, Eric, you mentioned Jalen Milroe earlier, and he's a player we've talked about a lot on this podcast. He's still a player where we still may be seeing him scratching the surface of what he can be as a player. But is he? If I draft him, do I sell out and craft an offense for him, knowing that we still aren't sure exactly who he is, or do I try to work him in a way and maybe be a little more conservative about things? And can I even do that? Can I take a middle step if I'm going to go and take a Jalen Milroe? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think we have evidence of the blueprint, right? And I lived it a little bit with Cam Newton. But really, you're seeing it more with Anthony Richardson. It would be probably closer and a little bit. And he's not quite as refined as Jalen Hurts coming out as a passer. That was the one thing that jumped that Jalen made going to Oklahoma. You really saw him improve as a passer. But essentially, that's how you're going to structure out your offense. And look, you know it's going to be a heavy RPO system. It's going to be really more of a college-style offense. You're going to have QB power. It's going to be a staple of what you're doing. I think the biggest thing, as I see it as well, is it doesn't matter if you're running inside zone, outside zone, if you want to be a gap team like we have with Cam. You're going to have to match that, though, with the premier back, and that's also what you see. I mean, that's why, the Colts have Jonathan. Look, we drafted Christian McCaffrey in the 8th overall pick when we had Cam Newton. And you see that even look what's happened with Saquon Barkley and now Jalen Hurts. So there is a certain style that is required in a certain type of player, but it's not even so much the quarterback, but it's really matching him with, to me, a high level running back, and then knowing who you want to be in terms of what you want to do with your run game. So I think there's definitely a plan for him to be successful. But I do think, obviously, I think he's a guy that's going to take a little time.
Yeah, another team that you mentioned that didn't mention that I think is going with that same formula. Baltimore bringing in Derrick Henry again.
Right,
exactly. You've had a bunch of quality running backs there with Lamar, but again, now you bring in Derrick Henry and it changes the offense. And again, expectations never higher. Obviously, the ascendance that Lamar Jackson has had as a passer, take the athlete, take what he can do in the run game. As a passer, again, ton of similarities where, hey, they can make every throw. They still miss some throws, especially early. Lamar Jackson, again, the strides he's made as a passer in the NFL have been impressive. Again, why he's won the MVPs he has. But again, you just talk about that pairing, and it becomes a great conversation for Jalen.
And also with the tight ends, that's the thing that I really actually had a chance to step back and study. And when you look at Philly, their running backs have been taken, high in the second round. Previous to when you talk about Swift and I know they took the kid out of Penn State, but you look at what they've done. Now they finally got to Barkley, who is generational talent, right? You look at what we did in Carolina, taking Christian 8th overall. Prior to that, we had a back that they took, I think, 13th overall. And then to your point, playing off of Baltimore now, I think you're going to see Baltimore continuing that trend of, look, I think they're going to start valuing the running back. And so it would not surprise me if the Baltimore Ravens organization now is taking a running back, say, in the second round or late one or whatever it may be, right? But I do think that's how you mesh it. And then the other point of that is tight ends. That's the other critical piece of kind of how you kind of build an offense around this type of player.
Yeah, well, two positions that I think everybody out there has acknowledged. I know our friends Jordan Reed and Dane Brugler, who we've had on, really good tight end class, really good running back classes. So again, there's going to be some good players that, again, depending on where you value them and how you value the draft capital, you're going to be able to get a good player somewhere in the first, probably somewhere in the second, and definitely somewhere in the third. So as you transition, staying on the offensive side of the ball, guys in the trenches, Will Campbell, kind of at this point, consensus number one offensive lineman, offensive tackle. There are questions, though. Again, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Where do you put him? How do you evaluate Will? And what do you think of him overall?
Yeah, I think really how I see Will is I think he's going to be. First of all, I don't see him as a left tackle to begin with. I think this guy's going to have to play on the right side of the line at the tackle position. I think he can be a good, solid right tackle, but I think he can be an excellent guard. And that's going to have to be the questions that you kind of run into. Is that, and then do you want to take a potential guard that high? I think Brandon Sheriff. I mean, we've had some guys go like that. Quentin went high, like in that top 5, top 10 range, but that's always kind of a struggle. There's always kind of the thought that look, no guard is going to get you to the Super Bowl, though, right? So as you really kind of also get into positional value, that also kind of weighs into that. But this kid's a good football player. When it's all said and done, I think it's just going to be kind of the fit for, do you want to just go ahead and put him at tackle and, as they say, leave him out there until he fails and move him inside, or do you just want to just cut right to the chase and let's just go ahead and put this guy inside and let's roll and not worry about it?
Mm-hmm. So again, that had been all over the board on that one. Teams that are going to see him as a tackle, teams that are going to only see him as a guard, and he'll be every team's going to want to talk to him again to make sure a team wants to put him in the right spot and a spot that he's comfortable with. So again, if he has that tackle mindset and you glean that out in the interview process, again, it may affect where he ends up on a team's board. Last player, again, we talked about that deep tight end group. Again, wide receivers, we see and have seen the value of that wide receiver group. Again, you got to have a guy that is going to be written, depending on the team, as a tight end or wide receiver that really – his production is not going to say anything about the first round, but Colston Loveland out of Michigan, he just declared, I believe, within about the last week. So we're going to see his name. What are your thoughts on Colston? Where is his position, and where do you see him going?
I really love this player. I mean, this is really really the new generation of the tight end position, in my opinion, because this is the guy that he's an offensive weapon. He's not just a tight end. He can line up X, Z, F. You can move him, you can put him in line, but he is a matchup nightmare. And so, what are you going to do? I mean, obviously the biggest things when you get to these kind of guys is, are they going to draw the nickel? Well, you can do that, but again, you're going to run into issues with just his size, his length, the route running, the ball skills, and obviously if you put the big body on him, this guy can run. So this guy's a really intriguing athlete. You're really kind of getting back now into the Jimmy Grahams of the world and the Zach Ertz of the world, and you're getting into the Dalton Kincaids. I mean, these guys are just mismatch problems, and so it's what's really cool about even the last two guys and Will. That's the beauty of that, having that positional flexibility, right? Because regardless of what you talk about, even as it relates to Will or relates to Colston, anytime you get players that provide a level of positional flexibility, that's a win. And so, this isn't going to work against either one of these guys, but this guy's an outstanding football player. He really, obviously, we know that their offense was handicapped this year at the quarterback position, but this guy is going to make some noise next year. The second he comes in, he's a fantastic player.
Do you think he's as NFL ready as Brock Bowers has proven to be?
I think he's every bit as ready. I think
really?
He's every bit. I do. Coming out of that program, seeing the nuances in his game, I think he's every bit as ready. So I think this guy has a big time arrow up as we kind of go through this process. Without question, he's the first tight end off the board. And I think this guy is going to go pretty good in the draft when it's all said and done. Everything that I've heard about it from the outside, the character makeup, the work ethic makeup, the intangible factor with this guy, and then you match that with his athletic ability. I mean, this is this is what you want. I call these picks, just turn the card in and go to sleep. You're going to sleep good at night.
Those are good picks. Eric, I'll put you on the spot here. You've done a number of reports. Is there a player that, man, I just love this guy? It sounds like Colston is one of those guys, a guy we didn't talk about that, man, it's like, again, a go to sleep good at night guy that we didn't mention here. Who do you really like?
I'll tell you what, and now, of course, since you caught me on the spot, but this defensive end from Marshall that had crazy production this year, I love this guy. Plays reckless, played well against Ohio State, gets stepped up against the competition. Terrific game against Virginia Tech as well. So you saw this guy elevate his game against higher level comp, and then he dominated the competition level that he was at just at Marshall. So I think that was kind of a guy that was I would just kind of a sleeper that I would say. I didn't know much about him, and then you put the tape on and you start going through him, and you're like, hey, this guy has some incredible traits at the first step quickness and the bend and the relentless motor, and I love guys that strain. Pass rushers that strain to finish, that's an underrated trait, and you see that in his play. So I'm sorry, you caught me on the spot. I just drew a blank on his name, but
I would bet Neil knows his name.
Michael Green.
It's a good day for Neil. We're getting the Navy midshipman shout out and the Marshall shout out. So man, what a day, Neil.
The unicorn.
So he is a guy that really kind of surprised me on my radar that I didn't know a lot about. So
unfortunate.
I'm intrigued with his program.
And unfortunate for him and Marshall. Again, if you want to talk about the detriments of the transfer portal, again, you lose a coach and now you lose a quarter of your roster to the transfer portal. Again, unfortunate. They just can't. Again, all the media stuff about it. Again, really unfortunate that Marshall can't field a competitive team. It would be unsafe and unwise to try. Again, I'm glad that they stepped up, and again, they're going to allow, it sounds like, a local semi-local team that had those 5 wins to jump into the bowl game, which is good. Again, unfortunate for players like him that would have had one more chance. Again, that roster to go have a good time on the bowl trip, get some extra practices in. Again, all items that perhaps our new commissioner in college football can get sorted out whenever he gets hired, and lots of issues.
They desperately need to figure out a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Eric, this has been fantastic. Always love talking to you. I would imagine we're going to be seeing your name in the headlines. Hopefully getting some interviews, continuing to do good work across all your different spots. But really appreciate you being on, and definitely always love hearing from you.
Hey man, thanks so much for having me back on, and love the show, and all the best and happy holidays to you guys.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Merry Christmas to everybody.
Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file, folder, storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now. Nearly Christmas time. I hope no matter where you are in the football world, take time to spend with your family, get to a candlelight service on Christmas Eve, plan to take some extra time to enjoy whatever traditions you have. Looking at Christmas lights, making cookies, baking, whatever it is, keep your priorities in the right spot. The NFL and NCAA were here before you. It will both be here after you. Those people in your life may not have those same certainties. So work hard, stay focused, consider all the things that go into every football decision this time of year. And at the end of it all, keep scouting.